This week, join me and professional wildlife photographer Jared Lloyd as we photograph one of the harshest winter environments on Earth, Yellowstone National Park. Now, this park offers great wildlife photography opportunities year-round, but it's winter that is truly the most spectacular time of year to photograph its wildlife. I'm your host, Doug Gardner, and your wild photo adventure starts now. You know, one of the great things about working in places like Yellowstone National Park in the wintertime is that you get to experience how the animals survive in this brutal environment and the lifestyle that they have to live in order to survive this. But the more important thing is, in order for you to get out here and enjoy it, you got to be able to survive too. So we're going to go over a few little things that'll make you more comfortable and possibly save your life. You know, we want to start out with headgear. You know, headgear is where you lose the vast majority of your body heat. And you know, Jared, you've got the traditional type of twill type
toboggan beanie, whatever you want to call it, and the inside of it actually has polar fleece wrapped around inside of it for extra warmth. Very crucial for these sort of days. Yeah,
and like this morning we were in negative 37 degrees, very cold. We were at a higher altitude, a little bit of wind, and that just didn't cut the mustard. So in those kind of conditions you want to use a balaclava, which comes up over your nose and mouth, protects this whole area, and kind of blocks out all that wind. It just simply tucks in around your jacket and comes up over your nose and mouth like this. It traps in a lot of that heat. You move on down to the jackets, and I guess we should actually start with layering. You know, that's the most important thing in climates like this is to layer your clothing. Not only does that allow you to shed layers if you're active, if you're doing hiking, in deep snow and that kind of thing, you're going to build up a sweat. Sweat is what will get you every time. Sweat is the killer because that sweat will pull body heat away from your body. So being able to shed layers as you need is crucial. But I have actually 3 layers on. I started with a smart wool thermal underwear. And then on top of that, I have a polar fleece lined pants, and then on the outside, my jacket and my pants are a waterproof shell.
Yeah, I live up here in these sort of conditions, so I'm a little bit more acclimated to that. Plus, I'm kind of a bigger guy, if you haven't noticed that yet or not. And so I have a little bit less layering on than Doug does here. For me, I've got a t-shirt on, but remember, not cotton. Cotton kills. That's the saying that you want to keep in your mind. But I've got basically a t-shirt on, then I've got a flannel on over that, and then just this jacket here. And notice that both Doug and I are wearing camouflage right now. We're in Yellowstone National Park. If we wanted to be camouflaged, we would be wearing all white right now.
Exactly.
This is doing absolutely nothing for us in terms of disguising us from these animals. All it is that these type of jackets, first and foremost, are meant to be waterproof. This is a duck hunting jacket right here, and they're also designed for people that are sitting outdoors without moving for hours on end. And so it gives you lots of lots of room to layer and lots of fluff for that warm air to kind of build up around your body, and they're extremely warm. Now, whereas Doug has kind of a more traditional hunting pants on, what I opt for are actually snowmobile pants.
So in addition to having waterproof boots and waterproof pants, I also like to use gaiters. They simply just wrap around the bottom part of your pants here, and the strap goes under the boot, and a little hook ties into your laces, and this keeps snow from coming up your pants leg and then back down into your boots, which essentially will create wet feet.
So the next thing we need to talk about are boots. Boots are absolutely crucial when you're working in this sort of environment. My boots that I'm wearing are rated for negative 65. Doug's, on the other hand, are negative 45. Now you might think to yourself, well, it only got down to negative 37 today, so is negative 65 a little bit of an overkill? It's actually not. In fact, my feet did get a little bit cold today, even with negative 60. And you have to understand, the way that the ratings on boots work is that they're rated for activity. So if you're hiking, you're walking, you're working, then they're rated for that sort of temperature because your feet are producing heat. And what Doug and I have both found over the years in working in these sort of environments is that anywhere between 60 and 45 tend to be just about right for us.
Yeah, for what we can personally stand.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to hike with them. You got to be
Yeah.
able to climb in and out of vehicles. You got to clamber over rocks, and you know, you don't want to wear yourself out. And when you're wearing boots that weigh 10 pounds each, which some do, you know, you're going to significantly cut down on what you're actually able to do during the day out here.
If you've chosen the right boot, you should be able to get away with a thin pair of socks, whether it's polypropylene or another similar product that wicks moisture away from your foot, and then a heavier sock like a smart wool sock or something like that on top of it. You should have enough airspace around your foot that you can trap the heat. The same thing with layers. You want to be, the name of the game is trapping body heat between layers. If you get them too tight, you're kind of defeating the purpose.
That's right.
You're going to be working in snow, and you're going to be loosening those tripod legs, and your tripods are constantly going to be in the snow, so your hands are going to get wet if you don't have some waterproof gloves.
A little trick that I learned a long time ago with these type of gloves is that you can actually slip a set of hand warmers down inside of the gloves. So I have just, you know, the typical hand warmers that you shake to warm up sitting at the top of my hands in both of these gloves, and I can just feel that heat radiating out right to my fingertips. And so in the coldest of weather, I can still use these. And I can still feel my camera, I can work all the controls. Larger gloves that are actually designed for this sort of temperature, you can't feel your camera controls whatsoever, and they're basically useless on you.
Earlier in the week, I was doing some things and I could not actually use my gloves, and I've got severe frostbite and huge cuts, open wounds on my knuckles from just my hands being exposed just for a matter of minutes here.
Yeah,
this is serious business, guys. I mean, you can get yourself in a world of hurt real quick if you don't prepare appropriately. Eyewear.
If you spend several days in this sort of environment with that snow reflecting light back into your eyes, you can cause snow blindness, which will basically just shut down your trip.
Right, absolutely. Well, I tell you, I think we're prepared. We got snow, we got cold weather, and animals on the move. I think we're ready to do it. Let's get out of here.
All right, man. And Doug, patience, that's the name of this game, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, 3 days we've been trying to work this bull elk here. The first day, he's a long distance away on a hillside, tucked up at the edge of some trees. The second day, we find him down in that canyon, just completely unworkable.
Couldn't do anything with that.
Nothing at all.
Look at that, he's taking his antlers and knocking the snow off of the limbs all over him. That's very cool.
And then here, the third day, we're out before sunrise. You know, we wait him out. He comes up over this ridge like this, right in front of these beautiful Douglas firs. I mean, this is just absolutely fantastic.
You know, when you get behind the camera and the situation unfolds in front of you, you have to quickly make that decision. You know, lens length, where I need to be, where I need to position myself. And, you know, this scene right here kind of unfolded real quick. He came up out of that draw, and now he's just coming right up over this hill. This is really nice.
Yeah, this is beautiful. You know, one thing that we have to be really careful about here is the fact that we have a white sky and white snow in the foreground.
You think about elk, at least in my mind, you know, these are iconic animals that you think about when you think about the Rockies.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing more majestic than a big mature bull, and that's exactly what we got here. I mean, he is beautiful. You know, and we haven't seen a lot of big mature bulls this week in the park. You know, most of them, like you said, have migrated to other parts of the park.
Thousands of cows.
Yeah.
But as far as the bulls go, it's been pretty sparse this week.
Yeah, so like I said, putting your time in and finding a subject, working it, and tracking him down, and staying with it, you know, it's paid off. It really has. So in this particular situation, as he emerges up out of the canyon, you actually have the opportunity for two different shots. Right now, I'm shooting a 500mm lens, so I'm very tight on him. So I've got a very tight vertical shot as he comes up out of there. Now, as he comes up, I'm going to try to back up a little bit and get more of an environmental scene. Now, if you were shooting a zoom lens, like a 2 to 400, which is a superb large mammal lens, especially in park settings, you could do it right here on the spot and widen out a little bit and get more of the environment in which the animal is sitting in. One thing to keep in mind as you're making that conscious decision of whether this is going to be a portrait or an environmental portrait, keep in mind that environmental portraits sell much faster than the very tight fine art type shot, because environmental portraits have a lot of room. It tells more of a story. It has more uses. It can be used for inside 2-page double truck spreads and magazines. It can be used for billboards or anything that needs text dropped in on top of it. And so your image is going to bring you more income if you decide to go that route.
So it's really easy to get kind of lost behind your lens like this. You know, we've spent some time now photographing this bull elk, and we've moved around a little bit, and we've worked our way down into these thick willows here. The problem is, what we didn't realize at first is that there's actually bison just behind this elk here. And as we sat here photographing, slowly but surely, these bison have kind of worked their way in, and we've got 4 of them now that are pretty close to us. And so this is one of those sort of situations that if you're not constantly aware of your surroundings, then you can very quickly find yourself in a lot of trouble. So we need to go ahead and wrap this up and move out of this situation before we get ourselves in a pretty bad predicament.
Sounds good.
I'm going to take one last shot here.
There's always that one last shot.
There's always that one last shot.
Whoa! Those guys are fast. I tell you what, antelope, man, they are cool animals.
Yeah, they are. You know, they're actually the second fastest animal on Earth. The cheetah runs about 70 miles an hour. The pronghorn antelope runs at 60 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, they are so graceful looking. Now, what a beautiful animal. They're real smooth and petite looking, you know, that light colored fur. And man, look at the way, you know, all this snow around us is acting like a gigantic reflector. Yeah. You know, so you don't have those dark shadows under their bellies like we're used to seeing, you know, when they're in a more neutral tone setting. But what a pretty animal. And with these guys, you know, they're pretty much just grazing, so you almost have to kind of wait to let them do something interesting or get near some kind of interesting background or to, you know, add compositional elements to your photograph. Yeah, we've got a little buck coming in here on the left. Pretty animal, tell you what. One thing to keep in mind in these cold temperatures, you have to hold your breath when you're behind the camera, because the slight bit of steam that comes out of your mouth or your nose, it comes right up here under your viewfinder, instant fog, and that can mean the difference between getting a photograph or completely missing several. And we spotted this bighorn sheep from the road. Now, he's up here on the side of the slope, and from the road, it wasn't a very good shot. We were looking straight at the slope, so it was a very flat, unappealing scene. So when you have the opportunity to work your subject, try to change your angles. Now, we've talked about changing angles in the past, and a lot of times that's just literally moving to the right or the left. But in this instance, I want to really show the animal's environment and show the type of area the terrain that he lives in. So I've climbed up the edge of this slope to try to get eye level with him. Now I'm using the slope as a compositional element. And the light, by doing that, I've changed the light. The light's coming 45 degrees off to the side, and we're getting a much more dramatic shot now.
So Doug, this part of the park is what we call the northern range. It's a lot different than the rest of the national park here, as you've seen so far. You know, we're a lot lower elevation here, and you can see there's quite a bit less snow. You know, it's kind of more of like a desert-like situation. We've got sagebrush, we've got rocks. It's very different than the deep forest in the interior. And the key thing about this area in the wintertime is because it's lower elevation, because it's exposed to the southern sky, it has less snow, and it's easier for these animals to access their groceries, basically.
Yeah, I know you were telling me, you know, the amount of snow on the upper part of the mountains, determines how far it pushes down, like the elk and the rest of these animals.
Exactly. You know, one thing I notice with a lot of beginner photographers is that they're very scared for some reason to move that little sensor point around inside of their viewfinder. Just like you have to kind of constantly check your exposure and you're constantly checking your histogram as the lighting's changing, as these animals move across this hill face or this cliff face, you also need to be constantly working that autofocus button.
In a scene like this, we got a lot of this giant sage around, as you can see, and it's neutral tone, and the body of our bighorn sheep are neutral tone. So, exposing, you would think that you need to expose for those neutral tones, since the scene is primarily a neutral tone scene, but we still have patches of white. And as with all photography, you want to expose for those highlight areas. We still have to have consideration for these white snow patches that these magnificent animals are standing in and around. So staying on top of your exposure is key here.
You know, another thing that you notice here, you look at the coloration of these bighorn sheep compared to the color of the sagebrush and the rocks and the dirt that's exposed here, and you see they're all pretty much the same color.
Right.
They're very camouflaged to this. And so photographing these sheep against this hillside like this, they just blend right in. Right. There's nothing to really make them stand out, and that's going to be kind of the key challenge to photographing these animals this time of year in the wintertime when they're down low like this, is trying to figure out exactly how to make that animal jump out or leap out at your viewer. And so in this sort of situation, it's absolutely perfect. We're just about 90 degrees to the angle of the sun here, so we have maximum polarization naturally in the sky. And so you can see this one ram that's starting to walk his way across the ridge up here.
They're steady on the move.
Exactly. So you look at it, suddenly we have this ram that steps up on top of these rocks, and instead of a brown background for a brown animal, we have this just beautiful cobalt blue sky behind him, and it just really jumps out at us. So it's far more interesting than, photographing this guy against, just kind of a brown and rather blasé background that we had earlier.
Yeah, separation is the key. I mean, with all photography, you don't want it to blend into the background. So anything that can create separation, whether that be a shallow depth of field, that can help create separation. Like you said, the background can do it. But, making that subject pop out from the background is key. When you're photographing these animals, you really want your photographs to capture the essence of these magnificent animals. I mean, these are the true icons of the high Rockies, and you want your images to say something. You don't want the same old blasé image that everybody else has got. So a lot of times, just simply waiting on body position. Stay on the animal as he moves across the slope here. Just an animal sitting against a flat slope, that doesn't tell a story. But wait for that big ram to step up 1 foot up onto a rock and turn and look back over his shoulder. Or he's angled away from you and he turns back and looks over his back at you, or looks at the rest of the herd. Those are the type of images that express some kind of feeling. All right, Jerry, well, I think I got some pretty good shots out of this. You done?
Yeah, I'm good.
Tell you what, they're making their way. Looks like the whole herd is making their way down around this the edge of this mountain. Let's proceed on down here. We might find some better angles, and who knows, we'll run into some deep snow here, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Tell you what, Jerry, this is beautiful. I mean, even though we're not in the park technically anymore, this is beautiful up through here.
Yeah, it really pays to learn some of the back roads around the area and get up in the hillsides, up in the national forest.
Hey, we even got some mule deer right up here on this slope in front of us.
That's why we're here, Doug.
Wow, this is beautiful.
So, Doug, after the creation of the national park, Congress realized that the political boundaries, that's Yellowstone, doesn't actually encompass the entire ecosystem. So what they ended up doing was surrounding the entire national park with national forests, which are all fantastic places to photograph, like we're in right now. And so, you really want to get off the main road sometimes, kick it in a four-wheel drive, and cruise up into these back roads safely, obviously.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, in weather like this, you've really got to be careful.
Oh, definitely.
You can drive off the road in a snowdrift, and it might be the end of you.
That's right.
These animals, they don't know the boundaries, and that's the cool thing about this. Can you believe this? Look at this big buck. I mean, he's not a monster buck, but he is a very respectable mule deer. laying down right here in front of us.
Yeah, this isn't typical South Carolina whitetail behavior, is it?
No, it's not. No, around home they're trying to get away from it as fast as possible. This is really nice.
That's why we work here.
You know, look at that little button buck coming up behind me. There you go. That's a nice shot. Oh, we're getting a little bit of behavior. That's what I'm talking about.
That's an intimate moment right there. Yeah.
Waiting on the behavior.
Yep.
Look at it. They're interacting together. He's kind of rubbing his snout up there against the big buck's antlers. Very cool. Oh my gosh, Jared. I'm really tight on this. You know, I'm shooting a straight 500 and I'm full animal, frame to frame.
Yeah, Doug, I'm shooting with a 600 millimeter here in order to capture these tight portraits as well, but personally I also like to carry in a shorter lens whenever it's possible, and so that's why I drug in this 200 to 400 with me. And you know, normally this is the type of lens that most people would lock down on a tripod, but as long as you're using proper long lens hand holding technique, you know, you can get away with hand holding something like this, especially in such good light. And so what I like to do, and really I guess is the proper way of doing this, is you take the barrel of the lens and rest it in the palm of your hand, and you just kind of bring the camera in nice and tight, lock your elbows into your sides, into your chest here, and you use your entire upper body to rotate with the animal as it moves across instead of swinging your arms around. And that gives you a pretty steady platform to shoot like this from.
I tell you, this is a really nice scenario here. You know, I found that it seems like most beginner photographers, they really stress themselves out about photographing subjects in white snow, especially dark subjects in white snow. You know, and really it's a simple way to get an exposure if you know how to do it properly.
When it comes down to photographing in the snow, probably the easiest way to do it is to just simply use manual exposure. And so what I like to do is I'll switch my camera over to spot metering. I'll spot meter off of the brightest area on the snow in my composition. And since I'm shooting a Nikon, that means I'm probably going to end up adding about one full stop, 2/3 to one full stop of compensation. Canon cameras, they have a little bit different type of metering system. You're probably going to end up closer to 1 2/3 full stops, maybe even 2 full stops. You set your exposure that way, turn, recompose, and start shooting, and you're really not even going to have to change that exposure until the light changes considerably, or otherwise you move.
And one rule to go by is if you expose properly for the highlights, no matter what the scenario, whether it's shade or full sun, you're dealing with white or bright subjects. If your exposure is coming out so that the white areas is exposed properly and the dark areas are just going black, you know the situation is too contrasty. So you need to, you know, relocate, change angle, or get a little more creative.
Well, exactly. You know, today, you know, the kind of the buzzword in photography is histogram. Check your histogram. Right. That's the end-all, be-all of your exposure. You know, we go back to the days of film and slides, and it wasn't histogram, it was 18% gray.
Right.
You know,
right.
And so the problem is I feel that a lot of photographers don't truly understand how the exposure, you know, system inside of their camera actually works. And though we have digital technology and we have histograms to work by, we still work with a metering system that's exposing for 18% gray at all times. And so as long as you know that snow is technically white and not gray, you know that you can meter off of the snow, add light by slowing down the shutter speed or upping your ISO or opening up your aperture, of course, and you can turn that gray snow into white snow like it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
It's real simple.
And that histogram, you know, people make it a lot harder than it really needs to be. But basically you want to, you know, to adjust that exposure so that the information on the histogram is as far to the far right side as you can without touching that far right wall of it, and your exposure is going to be just right.
It's real simple as long as you understand exposed to the right. The right side of the histogram are the lights of the brights. So rights are brights and the left is dark, and that's it.
This is some beautiful light on this buck that I tell you. Really nice. And this is one of those situations that is an easy exposure. You know, just exposed to that white, and he's neutral toned, so we know that he's not going to be underexposed.
That's right.
Wow, this is really nice.
Well, we got a bit of a drive to get out of here, though, Doug, so we should probably go ahead and shoulder the tripods and haul out.
I don't want to leave this, though, but I don't want to be left here.
You don't want to be wolf food either.
Yeah, and it's already minus 8 degrees, so but this is nice. Heat wave compared to this morning. I'm with you. Let's bug out.
Let's do it.
Mastering photography takes persistence and practice. Stay with it and look forward to future installments of the Ultimate Photo Guide Digital Photography Series.
This week, join me and professional wildlife photographer Jared Lloyd as we photograph one of the harshest winter environments on Earth, Yellowstone National Park. Now, this park offers great wildlife photography opportunities year-round, but it's winter that is truly the most spectacular time of year to photograph this wildlife. I'm your host, Doug Gardner, and your wild photo adventure starts now. Wow, what a spectacular place, Jared. I mean, this is unbelievable. I'm so glad that President Grant years ago had the wherewithal to protect places like this. I mean, this is really special.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky to have this place. You know, it's 2.2 million acres that have been set aside, and it's basically a wildlife photographer's paradise. You know, I'd venture to say that this is the #1 photographic destination in, let's say, the lower 48 states here. You know, it's our first national park. You know, 1871 is when Grant set it aside, and it's just as incredible as the day that, you know, they put this into place.
Well, I'm certainly glad they did. And you know, the amount of wildlife that you can see, the variety that you can see is really spectacular.
Well, the variety is what's truly spectacular. I mean, this is the only place in the lower 48 states that you have every single species of mammal that was here before Columbus set sail across the ocean. I mean, that's pretty spectacular if you think about the history of our people on this landscape, and yet we have that still right here, or at least since we reintroduced the wolf in 1996.
Wow. Now, what kind of population of wolves? Are they doing good? Or?
Yeah, they're doing pretty good. We've got probably about 85 to 90 or something around that range right now.
Very cool. Well, I'm hoping we'll get a chance to see some of those. Tell you what, daylight's burning. We got snow rolling in. I want to get some shots of animals in the snow, so let's get out of here.
All right, let's do it.
This is a beautiful situation. This coyote came in from 600 yards down the river, and he walked the edge of the river all the way up, jumped over the cattails, and now he's just kind of relaxed right here. It looks like he's getting ready to pounce on something. He's trying to listen.
Doug, if you watch the ears of this coyote, you'll see that they're just constantly going. She'll close her eyes, actually, because she doesn't even need those things. But if you just watch those ears, they're constantly twitching, moving left, moving right, moving forward, as she's listening for mice below her.
This is a little too close for comfort. You don't mind if I listen? I'm a human tripod. Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. I'll have to say this is a very uncomfortable position.
Let me prop some snow up for you.
Both physically and socially. But, I mean, it doesn't get much nicer than this. I mean, look at this. He obviously is not worried about us here at all. But he's almost giving us like a tender moment. In situations like this, you know, you've got a little bit of time, so always keep a check on your exposure. The light has been going in and out because we got a snowstorm coming in.
This is one of those situations where it's real easy to underexpose the scene. You know, when we look at that snow, it's supposed to be white, but if you shoot this at what your meter says it's supposed to be, it's going to be dark gray. In fact, it's actually going to be at 18% gray specifically. So with my camera right now, I'm having to overexpose by a stop and a third to get this dialed in just right.
Look at the way he's got his paw up.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, Jared, I think I'm gonna try to ease down this bank a little bit and see if I can change the angle of view. This is really nice, but you know, we don't know what kind of angle we got. It may be even more spectacular. So I'm gonna try to ease down.
Slip down there. I'm gonna hold tight right here.
Let me know if his behavior changes and tell me to stop.
All right, absolutely.
Well, that's a perfect example of you got to gamble. Because I moved, when he pounced, I lost that shot. All we can do is wait and see if he does it again. It's starting to snow harder now, and the wind's starting to blow. So we've lost a little bit of light. But still, this is turned into from a good scene to a really great scene, because now we're showing snow and we can show the environment in which the animal lives in.
Doug, did I tell you I like Yellowstone in the winter?
You know, one of the great things about working in places like Yellowstone National Park in the wintertime is that you get to experience how the animals survive in this brutal environment and the lifestyle that they have to live in order to survive this. But the more important thing is, in order for you to get out here and enjoy it, you got to be able to survive too. So we're going to go over a few little things that'll make you more comfortable and possibly save your life. And I guess we should actually start with the layering. That's the most important thing in climates like this, is to layer your clothing. Not only does that allow you to shed layers if you're active, if you're doing hiking, in deep snow and that kind of thing, you're going to build up a sweat. Sweat is what will get you every time. Sweat is the killer, because that sweat will pull body heat away from your body. So being able to shed layers as you need is crucial. I have actually 3 layers on. I started with a smart wool thermal underwear. On top of that, I have polar fleece lined pants. And then on the outside, my jacket and my pants, it's a waterproof shell. You're going to be working in snow, and you're going to be loosening those tripod legs, and your tripods are constantly going to be in the snow. So your hands are going to get wet if you don't have some waterproof gloves. Earlier in the week, I've got severe frostbite and huge cuts, open wounds on my knuckles from just my hands being exposed just for a matter of minutes. When you get behind the camera and the situation unfolds in front of you, you have to quickly make that decision. You know, lens length, where I need to be, where I need to position myself. And you know, this scene right here kind of unfolded real quick. At least in my mind, you know, these are iconic animals that you think about when you think about the Rockies.
Oh, absolutely.
Putting your time in and finding a subject, working it, and tracking him down, and staying with it. You know, it's paid off.
Absolutely.
It really has.
This is classic winter in Yellowstone situation right now. We have bison in extraordinarily deep snow. We waded into this, you know, it was over my waist. I'm 6'2", so you know, we're dealing with, you know, 3, maybe even 4 feet of snow that I'm seeing these bison trudge through. And as beautiful as this situation is, this can actually be extremely difficult to work. And primarily that's because of how these animals are feeding. And if you watch, you can actually see these bison as they swing their heads back and forth to brush the snow or push the snow out of the way so they can access the grass below them. All the other species of ungulates or hoofed mammals that are out here, they'll paw down through the snow, but the bison do things very differently. They use that massive head of theirs to remove the snow to feed in these areas. Because of the depth of the snow, it's oftentimes very difficult to get a clean shot of their face. So you need to be really precise with what you're doing here, and you need to be very cautious of when you trip that shutter button. Because when their heads are down in a two-dimensional plane that we're seeing this in from our cameras, you know, it loses the excitement and it loses the drama that we're actually seeing with our eyes. So we want to wait and make sure that we get that head to pop up and maybe even that look straight at the camera, just like that right there. And that's when we want to trip the shutter button. In wildlife photography, we're at the mercy of the animals that we're photographing. We're not in a studio. We can't control the scenario. And so inevitably, there's going to be distracting elements that you have to deal with in a situation like this. And in this scenario in particular, we have this beautiful background with these conifers covered in snow, and then you have the occasional dead tree. That's not a problem as long as you account for that tree in your composition. And so you don't want something like this growing out of the bison's head. You want to make sure that you move yourself around or you compose in such a way as to make that dead tree back there part of the composition. The key thing to remember here is that if it doesn't add to the composition, then it actually hurts the composition. And so if you can't figure out a way to work that dead tree into the background, then you just simply need to move or not take a shot at all and wait for the scene to change.
Now, Jared, this is a nice opportunity here. I mean, it looks like all our hard work paid off. We've seen this guy, what, 3 times now this week? And he's kind of been in generally the same area. And, you know, taking that extra time this morning to kind of track him, follow his tracks. We had fresh snow fall last night, so it was pretty easy to track him.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to put in the time to really work to find these animals. And, you know, we worked our way up and down the Madison River several times here. And luckily, because of that fresh snow, we could tell very quickly which were old tracks and which were fresh tracks. Once we honed in on where those fresh tracks were leading, you know, it was just a matter of getting out of the snow coach, climbing down to the river, and just kind of creeping along with a set of binoculars to find this guy. And lo and behold, there he was, stuffed up inside of a log hanging over the river there.
I'm actually very surprised we even saw him because he blended in so well there.
Oh, it's perfectly camouflaged.
It looks like he's going to ease down the bank here. I don't know if he's hunting or if he's just going to find another place to rest or what.
Hopefully he's hunting.
You know, one of the unique things about this particular cat, some of the other film crews that were in here, they were specifically in here photographing and filming this particular cat because he has a very strange way a unique way, I should say, of hunting. He will actually dive in the water, and that's very uncommon for any of the cat species except for the tiger.
Yeah.
And so this is really unique. It'd be great if we could see him catch a muskrat or something like that, or some kind of duck.
Yeah, this individual bobcat is famous for that.
Yeah. Now, just like with the rest of the animals we photographed this week so far, exposing for this, we're doing exactly the same thing. We got full sun on white snow, a lot of white snow. And so I'm metering the snow, and my meter wants to tell me that it's 1/5000th of a second at 5.6 at 100 ISO. But I know that snow needs to go back to white instead of gray. So I'm going to open up one full stop, which takes my shutter speed down to 1/2500th of a second. That exposure is coming out dead on for this mostly neutral tone cat here. He doesn't seem to be bothered by our presence at all.
No, not at all. I mean, he's obviously aware that we're here, but, you know, coming in like this, kind of digging out something of a hole nice and slowly and kind of, you know, getting ourselves down low, we're partially concealed by the snow. And like I said, even though he's very much aware that we're sitting here, by doing this, it helps to kind of keep him at ease. And we're able to somewhat mask a lot of our movements here to where basically it's just our cameras and our heads and hands sticking up above this snowbank looking at him now.
You know, a lot of time with wildlife, when animals especially that are not habituated to humans, you know, you do need to wear camouflage. You do need to use blinds. You do need to, you know, try to move as quietly and stealthily as possible. And a lot of times, something as simple as shade of a tree, you know, the shade of the forest is sometimes your best cover.
That's all you need. So this is one of the few situations when I'm photographing in snow that I would actually switch over to aperture priority. Normally, you know, I'm right with Doug. I photograph everything in manual in this sort of scenario. However, right now overhead we have clouds that are just racing by. There's some really high-level winds going on, and so the lighting situation is changing very rapidly. So with the sun coming over our back right now, I'm able to switch my camera over to 3D matrix metering, or for Canon shooters that would be evaluative. I set a +1 exposure compensation, and I allow the computer inside of the camera to make the decision as to what my shutter speed should be. I've got everything set up right now to make sure that shutter never goes below 1200, and that seems to be just about right for me.
Well, Jared, it looks like he's easing on down, hunting down the edge of the river. Tell you what, you know, let's dig out of here and just kind of follow down the edge of the opposite side of the river here down the bank and just try to keep up with it.
Yeah, that's all we can do right now. Anytime you're photographing a bird like this in this sort of tight cover up in a tree, you know, this sort of overcast lighting that we have right now is absolutely perfect. If we had any sort of sun out right now, we would have harsh highlights and very deep shadows. And that's a dynamic range that your camera just wouldn't be able to handle. So overcast lighting when working in forested situations or working with birds and trees is the absolute perfect type of lighting. And what I like to do in this sort of scenario, I'll drop my aperture down to f4, my f-stop down to f4. That's going to give me an extremely narrow depth of field. And when shooting with these longer lenses like this, and especially at close distances, you have to be surgically precise with your focusing. If I were to focus just below the eye on the neck or part of the shoulder at f4 like this, at such a narrow depth of field, that eye would actually be out of focus. And of course, as everybody knows, the eye is the most important part of the subject. Yeah, technically, just a few years ago, this species of grouse didn't even exist. This is what we used to call the blue grouse here, but it's since been divided into two species, the dusky and the sooty grouse, in which case we're watching the dusky grouse right now. Now, it's real interesting if you watch this guy sitting in this tree here, he's actually reaching out and plucking needles from this conifer here. And that's something that's very unique about this species here, and that's how they survive the winter. And there's very few species of any sort of animal that can survive off of this sort of stuff. Whoa, 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 stop, 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 right here, right here. All right, there's something under those trees right there. Doug, this might actually be a wolf. Let's check this out. Man, Doug, look at this. We were driving up the road. You said you thought you saw a coyote. It looked a little big to me. You know, we pull up. Beautiful example of a gray wolf here tucked under these trees right now. This is absolutely gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. You know, it's not a photograph.
No,
but,
by no means. By
but
no means.
I mean, he's behind the trees, got a lot of stuff in the way, but just the opportunity to see this magnificent animal, I mean, they're elusive. They don't want to be near people, and just to be this close to one is really special.
Oh yeah, this is what winter in Yellowstone is all about right here.
And that guy's on a kill.
Yeah. Yeah, or at least looks like a rack of ribs right there that she's got. Barbecued maybe? All right, let's go ahead and let her be, and we'll keep on moving here.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So Doug, after the creation of the national park, Congress realized that the political boundaries, that's Yellowstone, doesn't actually encompass the entire ecosystem. So what they ended up doing was surrounding the entire national park with national forests, which are all fantastic places to photograph, like we're in right now.
I mean, even though we're not in the park technically anymore, this is beautiful through here. These animals, they don't know the boundaries, and that's the cool thing about this. Oh my gosh, Jared. Wow, this is really nice. The sun's gonna be dropping out of the way here shortly though, but for the time being, this is a great situation.
Yeah, this is gorgeous.
I'd like to take this opportunity to explain to you how to determine exposure for neutral tone subjects in snow. Now, it doesn't matter what the lighting situation is. It doesn't matter if it's overcast or if it's full sun. The process is going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change is how much you compensate your exposure. So basically what you want to do is you want to point your camera's meter, which is the center part of your viewfinder, at the white snow that is in the same light as your subject. Depress your shutter halfway down, which activates the meter, and start adjusting your f-stop and your shutter speed and ISO until the meter on the inside of the camera reads 0. That's a neutral tone exposure. The camera's meter is built to determine a neutral tone exposure. It basically says that everything you pointed at is neutral gray, and that's not the case. The snow is white, it's not gray. We don't want gray snow. So we want to compensate our exposure. In order to bring the snow back to white, we have to add light to it. So my meter right now is telling me that 1/1600th of a second at 5.6 and 400 ISO is a proper exposure for that snow. That is not correct. That's going to give me gray snow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add light by simply adjusting my shutter speed down to 1/800th of a second. By doing that now, I've opened my exposures up, the snow is pretty and white, and the elk will be properly exposed.
Well, we got a bit of a drive to get out of here though, Doug, so we should probably go ahead and shoulder the tripod.
I don't want to leave this though, but I don't want to be left here.
You don't want to be wolf food either.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's bug out.
Let's do it.
Well, I think it goes without saying, the wildlife photography opportunities here are truly amazing, and the brutal winter weather these animals have to endure gives us a greater appreciation for these animals. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and learned a little more about winter photography in Yellowstone National Park. And remember, it's not just about the photograph, it's the outdoor experience. I'm your host, Doug Gardner. Thank you for joining me on another edition of Wild Photo Adventures.
Mastering photography takes persistence and practice. Stay with it and look forward to future installments of the Ultimate Photo Guide Digital Photography Series.